Hello and welcome back to the Done Deal YouTube channel, and today you join us with a very new popular electric car. You might have heard of BYD, which stands for Build Your Dreams, and if you have, then you've maybe seen one of these, which is the Seal. Now what's quite interesting about this is since the beginning of 2024 there has been 630 of these registered on Irish roads at the time of filming this, and what's more is there's been nearly 1,300 BYDs, which is almost double the amount of electric Audis. Let's begin by talking about the battery. So to begin with, you might have heard the term that BYDs use a blade battery, but what is that? Well, it's a lithium iron phosphate battery, and the benefit of that, well, there's a couple. There's no mining of cobalt, which is a good thing for many reasons, but on top of that, it actually means you can charge it to 100%. With a traditional electric car's battery, it can cause a little bit of damage to frequently charge it to 100%. So generally people only go to maybe 80 or 90%, but here with the blade battery, it doesn't actually make as much of a difference. Now that battery itself, 82.5 kilowatt hours, which is nice and big and kind of standard across the range of a car like this. And the range itself, well, that's up to 570 kilometers, which is very impressive. And in the real world, you will get pretty close to that in some nice summery conditions. And then of course, the question you're all wondering is how fast does it charge? Well, through here you can get 150 kilowatt fast charge. That means you can go from about 30 to 80% in less than a half an hour. It is quick, but it's worth noting that it's not as quick as something like a Hyundai Ioniq 6. Now, what I haven't mentioned yet is the design. And obviously design is subjective, but I think it looks gorgeous. So have a look. Has to be said, it looks really good. And actually, it's now a good time to talk about specs and prices. And thankfully, BYD have made this really easy. So there's not a whole lot of different options out there. The entry level is called the Design, and that is about 44,000 euros. Now that comes with the same 82 kilowatt hour battery, but it's a single motor. Now, the beauty of that is you'll get the longer 570 kilometer range. This is the Excellent, and this has a shorter range of 520 kilometers, but it has dual motor and it's very fast. And we'll talk about that when we're driving. In terms of the price for this one, well, that's about just under 50,000 euros, which I think is really good value, particularly when you see how well it drives, the spec and the interior. Now, one other thing I want to mention is that's pretty much it. It's not like some traditional German brands where you can start speccing up electric seats, all this stuff. That all comes as standard. In fact, the only real optional extras are colors. So there's 4 colors, blue, black, white and grey, that are all free, and then there's 2 optional extras in terms of colors, and they're 1,500 euro each. The interior of the BYD Seal, I think that's where it really comes into its own and actually separates it from something like a Tesla Model 3. It is gorgeous. The cockpit is so comfortable. These seats are brilliant. The way they're stitched, even the color, it's like some sort of unusual blue in the most gorgeous way. And you just feel like you're really in a nice place. The steering wheel, it gives me McLaren vibes for some weird reason, which is a beautiful thing. And also it's a nice size and it can be completely adjustable in terms of in, out, up, down. There's a small screen there with some driving information, but it's all really here in this 15.6 inch screen where the magic happens. I can't not show you this, you've probably seen it before, but how bonkers is that? You can go portrait or you can go landscape. How amazing is that? And I suppose that has all your key kind of control systems there. You've got Spotify built in, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. That's really where you'll spend most of your time, like in many cars, and it's fantastic. The only thing I don't love is the climate control is built in there, and actually when you start going through it, if you're doing this on a back road in rural Ireland, that could get a little bit dangerous, to be honest with you. But thankfully there's lots of safety systems that will keep you in lane. There's also heated and cooled seats. There's so much going on. What's more is down here as well, there's 2 wireless phone chargers and they charge fast. It's none of that stuff where you put your phone there at 50%, you drive for 2 hours and you've got 60. A 15-20 minute drive and you've gained 20% on my iPhone anyway. So it is lovely. There's armrests, 2 cup holders, and there's a bit of storage in there. But as a whole, it is a gorgeous cockpit and I can't fault it at all. Maybe a little bit more headroom, but that's about it. So to drive, well, if you're considering this or a Tesla Model 3 Performance, then let's just get the fun stuff out of the way as we launch. It is so quick, 522 brake horsepower. That is 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3.8 seconds. It is so rapid. Now I understand that the real world, you're not going to do that very often. And I've never owned an EV, but everyone I know who does says that that does wear off, and eventually you have to like the car for what it is in the real world. And I have to say, this does not disappoint. The seating position is absolutely phenomenal. The steering wheel is lovely, and it is covered in technology and driving aids. Obviously it's got all your standard things like cruise control, which is adaptive, lane keep assist, and it's really good on the motorway actually, to be fair to it. Incredible reversing and overhead 360 cameras. It is brilliant. In fact, I'm going to put up just a list of some of the driving aids on the screen right now. Another thing I have to say is the size is really perfect. I quite like a car that falls into this category. I think some of the modern SUVs, as gorgeous as they are maybe just ever so slightly too big for Irish roads, particularly if you're in and out of the city centre. Now I do want to touch on the elephant in the room, which is electric cars and how they tend to depreciate, and particularly with a brand that isn't necessarily very proven in Ireland, it's just something to consider. Particularly, for example, if you were to buy a Mercedes-Benz, you can kind of look at how they've depreciated over the last number of years. It's a little bit more tricky when it comes to something like a BYD. So for that reason, I'd actually probably advise trying to maybe buy it on some sort of PCP. That way at least you know you've got your guaranteed buyback. But it is just something to go into with your eyes open, and that's not just for BYD, it's for pretty much any electric car, or any car for that matter. You should have always done your homework beforehand, know roughly what it'll cost in 2, 3, 8 years whenever you're planning to trade it in for the next car. And lastly, it goes without saying that you should only buy an EV if you were able to charge at work, or ideally at home using the night rate, or even some suppliers are now offering free charge on a Sunday, for example. And that means if you do less than 500 kilometers, you can actually drive entirely free of charge. No pun intended. In the rear, it's actually quite nice and spacious. You've loads of knee room. Your feet and legs are kind of at a weird angle. I think that's because there's a slightly raised floor for the batteries, I suspect. Headroom is loads, even with the pan glass roof. I also love the look of the seats in front. They're very BMW iX, which I quite like. Then there's also an armrest, a USB and a USB-C charge point, and then there's ISOFIX points on both these seats and on the front passenger seat. I have to say, I love it from the back. This rear diffuser, it's so aggressive and really, really nice. But to open the boot, you just press this button there, which means in the winter you will get a dirty finger, but you can open it on the key, so it's not all bad. Now, in terms of the boot, you've got 400 litres. For context, a Golf is 380 litres, so it's bigger than the Golf or a Ford Focus. However, you can see it's a saloon style boot. And the problem with that is, if you want to put a dog or any big items in the boot, you are a little bit restricted. The seats do fold, but it does actually limit people. And a good friend of mine was really considering buying a BYD Seal, but that was actually the deal breaker, believe it or not. But as a whole, a nice boot and an electric tailgate. And we're not finished with the boot, because there is a front boot. And this can be used for a lot of different things. It's 53 litres. Now you can put your charging cables in there, but a real world, very handy feature on this is actually putting your takeaway in there. I know it sounds obscure, and if you had a really large, massive pizza, it might not fit, but you would fit a nice Chinese takeaway in there, which is very handy. So overall, what is the synopsis on the BYD Seal? Personally, I think it looks gorgeous. I'd probably go for a grey or a black colourway, but as a whole, I have to say, styling wise, it's brilliant. It's also really aerodynamic, as you can see. I love the way it drives. The tech is brilliant. I do wish that the boot was a little bit bigger. I think that's certainly going to be a little bit of a drawback for some other customers out there. But as a whole, it is really good. So if you would like to search for BYDs for sale in Ireland, you can hit the link up there. If you've enjoyed the review, then please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions for cars you'd like to see us review in the near future, then make sure to comment below. But for now, that is it from us. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.